I was 46 the autumn. I stopped reporting what I saw in the high timber because reporting it had cost me what was left of my standing in town. 3 times I'd radioed the district office about lights that didn't move like aircraft and a watched feeling that crawled up the back of my neck on clear nights. 3 times the sheriff had driven up to Garnet Hollow Station, looked at my logbook, and asked if I was sleeping enough. After the third visit, I kept my own counsel and did my job, which was watching for smoke and keeping the access road clear, and I told myself that was enough of a life for a man who'd already given the Army 20 years and had nothing left in him that wanted to argue with people who'd already made up their minds. There's a particular kind of quiet that settles into a man once he's stopped expecting to be believed. It isn't bitterness, exactly. It's closer to the quiet you keep in a church you don't attend anymore, but still respect. I kept my logs honest anyway, even the strange entries, because somewhere I decided that being right alone was still better than being wrong in company. I didn't know yet that the habit of believing my own eyes when no one else would was about to become the only qualification that mattered. The night it came down, there was no mistaking it. The light didn't streak and die like a meteor. It slowed, hung, and dropped behind a ridge with a sound like a door slamming underwater. I took my rifle and my coat and went down through the dark because that was the job too, fire or otherwise, and because some old instinct from another life wouldn't let me sit still and wait for morning. I found the wreck folded into a stand of cedar, metal still ticking as it cooled, and I found her thrown clear of it, one arm wrong beneath her, blood black in the moonlight against skin the color of hammered copper. Her hair was a deep, unbroken black, threaded faintly with a blue that seemed to glow and fade with her breathing, like something in her was still trying to signal for help even though she couldn't. I had no idea what she was. I only knew what she was not, which was something I could leave on a mountainside in the cold. I carried her up to the station because it was closer than anything else for miles, and because some part of me had already decided the sheriff wasn't going to hear about this one either. I set her wound, what I could of it, with the kit I kept for my own stupid accidents, and I gave her my bunk and sat up with my back to the door, and somewhere near dawn her eyes opened, dark amber, lit faintly from somewhere behind the color, fixed on me the way a wild thing fixes on a man before it decides whether to run. She didn't speak for 2 days. When she did, her voice was low and careful, like she was testing whether English would hold the shape of what she meant. She told me her name was Ithra Valen, and that until a season ago, she had worn a crown on a world I will never see, and that the men hunting the wreckage of her ship called themselves the Grey Flame Wardens, and answered to a council that had decided an empress who could not give them an heir was an empress they no longer needed. She said this without asking for anything from me, the way a person states a fact they've made peace with reciting. I poured her broth and didn't kneel and didn't flinch and didn't ask if it was true, and I think that was the first thing that surprised her. Not that I believed her, but that I didn't need to in order to keep tending the wound. I gave her my coat the first cold night. She tried to stand on her own and wouldn't admit she was still too weak. I gave her the good cup, not the chipped one, when I poured the coffee, and didn't think about it until I caught her staring at it like it was a strange kind of gift. Where I come from, she said, the cup tells you what you're worth at the table. No one has ever simply not thought about it before handing it to me. I told her where I came from a cup was just a cup, and she looked at me for a long moment with an expression I couldn't read yet, and didn't argue. We had 6 days like that, quiet, watchful, her strength coming back in small increments, me teaching her to read the ridge the way I read it, her teaching me, without meaning to, what it looked like when someone stopped flinching at kindness. She asked me once why I hadn't tried to sell the seal she wore, or trade her to whoever might pay for proof of what fell from the sky. And I told her that wasn't a thought I was capable of having, and she studied my face for a long while as if checking it for a lie she already suspected wasn't there. On the 4th night, I taught her the names of the few stars visible through the cedar, ordinary names, nothing royal about them, and she repeated them back slowly, like a woman memorizing something she intended to keep long after she left this mountain. The deputy came by once on a routine check, and I lied to his face about a sprained ankle and a niece visiting, and Ithra stood in the back room listening to a man dismiss the very idea of her, without knowing she was 3 feet away, and I watched something in her go very still and very old. "They don't believe you either," she said afterward. not as comfort, just as recognition. No, I said. They stopped believing me a long time before you fell out of the sky. She didn't say anything to that. She just looked at me like she was recalculating something she'd assumed was fixed. They found us on the seventh night. I heard the timber go wrong before I saw anything. No birds, no wind sound, just a held breath across the whole ridge. And then they came up through the trees in dark plate that ate the moonlight, 4 of them, moving like men who had never once needed to hurry. Ithra went the color of ash and told me to take the truck and go, that this was not my fight, and I had already done more than anyone in her own court had managed in a year. I told her I'd heard that argument before from officers smarter than her, and it had never once worked on me. I knew the ridge, and they didn't, and that bought us the only edge we had. I put 2 of them down in the dark with a rifle that was older than some of my furniture, using ground I'd walked for 9 years and they'd seen for 9 minutes. The third got close enough that I felt his blade open my shoulder before I put him through the chest with everything the old service revolver had left in it. The fourth had Ithra by the wrist and was dragging her toward the tree line when I came up behind him with no weapon left but my hands and my weight, and I said the only true thing I had, which was that I wasn't leaving her, not for him, not for his counsel, not for anything wearing armor that thought a crown was the only thing about a person worth keeping. It cost me 3 of his teeth and most of the strength in my left arm, but it was enough to let her get the seal from around her neck and call, for the first time since the coup, the only soldiers who had never stopped being hers. They came at first light, 6 ships, no fanfare, no fleet at her back the way a throne room might have staged it, just the last loyal hands of a court that had been waiting 9 months for a place to land. Ithra stood in the ash and the long shadows with her arm in a sling I'd made from my own shirt, and she didn't look like an empress reclaiming anything. She looked like a woman deciding, in real time, what she wanted to keep. She came and stood close enough that I could see the wet shine in her eyes hadn't spilled, the way she held herself together even now, and she took my battered hand in both of hers like it was something rare. On my world, she said, they would tell you a crown chooses the strongest sword. They are wrong. It chooses the one who stays when staying costs him everything and buys him nothing. I told her I hadn't done it for a crown. I know, she said. That is precisely why I'm giving you the only thing I have left that was never theirs to take. She didn't kneel, and I didn't either. She just stood there in the smoke-thinned dawn with my hand in hers, and said it plainly, the way she said everything now, not as a queen granting a favor, but as a woman naming a fact she'd already decided was true. I won't leave you, she said, echoing the only vow I'd ever made her, and for the first time in longer than I could remember, somebody believed me before I'd said a word.